Let's go over this again. You're saying you have nothing to do with what we found in your apartment. Is that correct? The detective turned away from the window and sat back down, giving his suspect a skeptical look. I already told you. Do I have to repeat myself? Yes, you'll repeat it as many times as necessary. 2 bodies were found in your apartment, and there was no one else there but you. Do you understand how serious this is? First-degree murder. You could be looking at life in prison. The detective picked up his mug of now cold coffee but seemed to change his mind about drinking it and set it back down. Listen, I'm a reasonable guy. I want to give you a chance. Tell me what happened, calmly and in detail, and I'll try to help you. Deal? Alright, fine. It all started when I decided to go to the woods to get a Christmas tree. Leslie had been telling me for a while that it was time to decorate the house. It was already December 10th. Christmas was around the corner, and I kept putting it off because of work and other things. Finally, my wife started outright arguing about it. Hold on, you went into the woods? What's wrong with the ones they sell in the city? They're on every corner. It's a tradition. My dad was from the countryside, and when I was a kid, he would take me out to the woods every Christmas season. We'd walk around, find the perfect tree, cut it down, and bring it home. It just stuck with me. It's convenient, practical, and best of all, free. So around 10 a.m., I got in my pickup truck and pulled out of the garage. I headed toward the woods. There's a great spot about an hour outside the city. Lots of lakes, good for fishing, and plenty of wild mushrooms too. By the time I got there, it was already noon. The sky was clear and bright blue, the sun was shining, and the snow crunched under my boots. It was just a normal, peaceful day. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then, as I was picking out the perfect tree, I saw something strange. Under one of the trees lay a human figure, a little boy in a bright yellow jacket. He wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound, looked dead, I swear to God. My stomach dropped. My first thought, someone had killed him and dumped the body here to bury later. But as I got closer, I realized he was still alive. He was just lying there, eyes open, completely still. Hey, kid, what are you doing out here? Are you okay? I ran over and touched his forehead. Ice cold. He couldn't speak, like he had been out there since early morning. And it was 20 degrees below freezing. I freaked out, dropped everything and rushed back to the city, straight to the hospital. Thankfully, the road wasn't far. In the car, the kid seemed to doze off. I must have made it back in record time, speeding past everyone I could, just to get him to the doctors as fast as possible. I headed toward the woods. There's a great spot about an hour outside the city. Lots of lakes, good for fishing, and plenty of wild mushrooms too. By the time I got there, it was already noon. The sky was clear and bright blue, the sun was shining, and the snow crunched under my boots. It was just a normal, peaceful day. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then, as I was picking out the perfect tree, I saw something strange. Under one of the trees lay a human figure, a little boy in a bright yellow jacket. He wasn't moving, wasn't making a sound. Looked dead, I swear to God. My stomach dropped. My first thought, someone had killed him and dumped the body here to bury later. But as I got closer, I realized he was still alive. He was just lying there, eyes open, completely still. Hey kid, what are you doing out here? Are you okay? I ran over and touched his forehead. Ice cold. He couldn't speak, like he had been out there since early morning. And it was 20 degrees below freezing. I freaked out, dropped everything and rushed back to the city, straight to the hospital. Thankfully, the road wasn't far. In the car, the kid seemed to doze off. I must have made it back in record time, speeding past everyone I could, just to get him to the doctors as fast as possible. And just imagine my shock when I pulled up to the hospital, jumped out of the car, and found the back seat completely empty. Nothing. Like the kid had never been there. Like it was some kind of vision or hallucination. Call it whatever you want, but I was not in the mood for jokes. I even ran through the possibility that he had jumped out of the car while I was driving. Maybe he got scared, thought I was kidnapping him? But even if that were the case, I would have heard something. The door opening, the rush of cold air, something. It made no sense. I stood outside the hospital for a good 20, maybe 30 minutes, trying to wrap my head around what had just happened. Then, with no other choice, I drove home. I needed to tell someone about this, and the only person I could think of was my wife. And that's when things got even stranger. I pull into the driveway, step inside, and see this. My wife, standing in the kitchen, cooking something, chatting away on the phone, but at the dining table, sitting there, silent, staring right at me, was the boy. The same boy. His yellow jacket was hanging neatly on the hook in the hallway. His boots were lined up perfectly next to my slippers, as if he had lived here for years. I won't lie, I was completely stunned. Olesya, what the hell is going on? She turned around and smiled. Oh, Kirill, you're back. Hold on, I'll call you later, she said into her phone before hanging up. Then she looked at me. Hey, how was the trip? You must be starving. Go wash up, I just finished making dinner. She walked over and kissed me on the cheek like nothing was out of the ordinary. But I couldn't take my eyes off the boy. He was still sitting there, completely silent, staring at me. Are you even listening to me? My voice came out louder than I expected. I asked you what the hell is going on? How did this kid get into our house? I just drove him to the hospital an hour ago. He nearly froze to death in the woods. Olesya frowned. Kirill, you're scaring me. Are you feeling okay? Maybe you have a fever or something. That's our son. A chill ran down my spine. What? I waited for her to laugh to tell me it was a joke, but she didn't. She was completely serious. Hold on. Are you actually serious right now? Olesya, what son? We've been together for 4 years. We don't have any kids. She rolled her eyes. Jesus, did you get wasted again? Spent half the day drinking in the garage and then said you were going to the woods? Couldn't even bother to buy a tree from the store. I clenched my fists. What the hell are you talking about? I was in the woods the entire time. I just got back. Enough, Kirill. I'm tired of your stupid jokes. You're like a damn clown. Just wash your hands and sit down before the food gets cold. I turned my head. The boy was still sitting at the table, still staring straight at me. You know, arguing with a woman is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It's pointless. Even if you're 100% sure you're right, it's better to just keep quiet and wait for things to settle down. Saves you a lot of stress. So that's exactly what I decided to do. As absurd as everything around me felt, I sat at the table, quietly eating and trying not to provoke her. She acted like nothing was out of the ordinary, like everything was fine, like I was the crazy one. Olesya didn't remember when we first met, didn't remember when we got engaged, and logically speaking, this kid looked 7, maybe 8 years old. But we'd only been together for 4 years. How the hell did that add up? Still, I didn't want to push it, at least not right away. Olesya, are we seriously going to pretend everything is normal? I asked, twirling my spoon between my fingers. She didn't even look up from her bowl. What are you talking about now? I'm telling you, this isn't funny. Cut the act. She sighed and put her spoon down. Kirill, I honestly have no idea what's wrong with you. If you don't believe me, see for yourself. I pushed back my chair and walked into the living room, heading straight for the shelf where we kept our framed photos. But the second I picked one up, my stomach dropped. It was a picture of me and Olesya, Central Park. She was holding my hand, laughing, a stick of cotton candy in the other. Just like I remembered. Except there was a boy in a yellow jacket standing right next to us. The same boy. That day, we ran into her friend, and we asked her to snap some pictures of our walk. Here's why I'm telling you this. In the photo where it was just me and Olesya, that same boy showed up. I have no idea how he ended up there, but it really pissed me off. I started going through our photo album, and every single picture seemed like it had been edited. And they did it so well that you couldn't tell the difference from the originals. That's when I started realizing something was off. Olesya walked over to the drawer where we kept our documents and pulled out the birth certificate for this Nikita. Can you imagine how shocked I was? Just this morning, I didn't have a son. I was living happily with my wife, who adored me. Honestly, we weren't planning on having kids anytime soon. It was total madness. I felt like everything around me was falling apart. Then it got even weirder. I found a bunch of children's things in the closet, toys, clothes, stuff that shouldn't have been there. And as time went on, I realized it had never been there before. But at that moment, it just pushed me over the edge. I grabbed my jacket and stormed out of the apartment, leaving my wife alone with this strange boy. The rest of the day I spent in my garage, trying to wrap my head around what the hell was going on. Why did this Nikita suddenly show up in my life? What kind of nightmare was this? My mind was racing. Eventually, I decided I needed to talk to Roma. We'd been friends since school, and he was this massive guy, over 6 feet tall. Maybe he could help me make sense of all this. He's always been a tough guy, did boxing and wrestling, never let anyone push him around, and always had others' backs. Everyone called him Jeko, though that nickname stuck since 7th grade, and I don't even remember why. He was the one I called when I needed someone to talk to, someone to share what I was going through. Jeko lived in the same building as me, so when I called him and told him I needed his support, he was right there. Not long after, he was knocking on the door of my garage. "Quick response team has arrived. What's going on?" he said, stepping inside. I was sitting there with a bottle in my hand, about to drink something I'd long sworn off. "Hey, stop it. If Olesya finds out, you're gonna regret it," he said, taking the bottle from me, and without leaving the garage, dumping its contents outside. "By the look on your face, I can tell this situation's bad. Come on, tell me calmly what happened, and I'll see if I can help. Deal?" I started telling him everything that had happened again. We talked for a while, and when we were heading back to my place, it was already late. As we neared the entrance to our building, my buddy suddenly said, "Man, this story's crazy, but one thing's for sure, you're not a dad. As for Olesya, maybe she's hiding something from you? Watch your mouth. That's still my wife." I snapped back, annoyed. "Come on, I'm just joking. Don't you get it?" he said with a grin. "But seriously, maybe she's hinting that it's time to start thinking about kids. After all, your 30s are coming up soon, you know? Even if that's the case, about the photos and the birth certificate. I'm sure it's all about that little brat," I said, feeling more and more irritated. "My address, sure. There are a lot of questions. You won't believe it until you see it for yourself. All right, here's the plan. Tomorrow morning I'll come over, we'll talk to Olesya, and I'll check out this Nikita. Gotta know your own kid, right?" My friend continued. After his silly joke, I felt a little better. There was a sense of support I'd been missing in this whirlwind of madness. I wouldn't have made it out of this alone. Jeko lived on the 2nd floor, while my apartment was on the 4th. As soon as we entered the building and said goodbye, a wave of depression hit me again. It wasn't surprising. Olesya and I had fought. I had to get up early for work the next day. And now this uninvited guest had attached himself to my family and wouldn't leave. When I reached my floor and opened the door, I found that everyone was already asleep. The lights were off, and there was a dead silence in the hallway. Olesya often did this, went to bed early when I wasn't home. She'd leave dinner on the stove and head to the bedroom to sleep. But for some reason, that night I felt a sense of unease. Something was off. As I mentioned earlier, Olesya and I had argued, and then I just slammed the door and left, not even knowing where I was going, for the whole day. She hadn't called me once during that time. Had she really gotten that mad at me? I took off my coat quietly and walked toward the kitchen. After grabbing a couple of sandwiches, I headed into the hallway. I wanted to check where Olesya had put that kid. We had 2 other rooms besides the bedroom. A living room, and let's call it a nursery. So there he was, lying in the nursery on the couch. I didn't want to wake him up, though there were a lot of questions in my head. I thought, tomorrow is another day, I'll figure it out then. But here's the thing. After checking on the kid, I wanted to see my wife. However, waking her up was absolutely off limits, and getting into bed with dirty clothes wasn't the best option. So, all I needed was to see her still silhouette under the blanket, which calmed me down enough to head to the shower. However, as I came out of the bathroom, I noticed the silhouette of the boy standing in the hallway. His face was hidden in the shadow, but I was sure he was staring at me, and it gave me an eerie feeling. "Hey, why aren't you sleeping? Need to use the bathroom?" I asked. He didn't answer. The boy just stood there, staring at me as if I were the intruder in this house. "You hear me?" I asked again. Silence. He'd been silent the whole ride, and now here he was, frozen in place. I decided to press him. I moved closer, ready to ask more questions, hoping to scare him into talking. "Look, I've got a lot to talk about with you. I was going to do this in the morning, but since you're up, let's talk now. Who are you, and what's with the photos? Why does my wife think you're our son?" "Dad, I am your son," he replied. His answer sent chills down my spine. All my confidence suddenly evaporated. I started acting like a cornered kitten. "You're not my son. I found you today in the woods and thought you needed help." I barely said it out loud, but I could tell I didn't believe it myself. "Why are you resisting?" "Dad, Mom has already accepted it. Why can't you? Don't you love me?" And that's when I realized, for the first time, that I was facing something completely inexplicable. All this time, I hadn't been dealing with just a child. Yes, he looked like a kid, but I could feel something otherworldly behind him. Something that could easily influence people's thoughts, ideas, beliefs, and they would accept it, agree with it, and do whatever it told them. For some reason, I wasn't affected by it, and that seemed to make him angry. He couldn't understand why I wasn't following his commands. Personally, I have a theory about it. I think it has to do with the cross my mom gave me when I was a kid. She told me, "Wear it and never take it off. It will protect you from any harm." Maybe that's what kept me safe from his influence. "I'm not afraid of you," I said. "You hear me? Either you leave, go back to where you came from, or I'll call in a team of priests, and you'll regret it. Try me," he hissed. "I'll tear your head off, and then I'll do the same to your little friend." And that's when the wildest part of the story began. The creature that had been standing in the dark all this time suddenly emerged in the moonlight, streaming through the living room window into the corridor. I finally saw its true form. Now the demon was much taller than a 7-year-old child. Its body seemed to shift, its bones cracking and joints popping as its limbs stretched and lengthened, the bones twisting as if I was facing a transformer from another dimension. I couldn't make out its face. All my attention was focused on its movements, which were almost hypnotic. But I didn't give in to its influence. Then, in a move of desperation, it threw me aside. I slammed into the front door, but luckily, I didn't break anything. I was fortunate that the door was only locked with an internal latch. Soon, I managed to escape the apartment and run into the hallway. Of course, the first person I decided to turn to was Wilhelm. Honestly, I didn't have anyone else in mind. After my shower, I was in nothing but my underwear, and I had to find someone to tell what was happening. I couldn't exactly call the police. I remember my friend was about to go to sleep when I started pounding on his door like a madman. "Dude, open up, it's me. Oh my God, what, did your wife kick you out? Why are you out here half naked? There's something up there, some freak. It almost tore my head off." "What do you mean, freak? Who attacked you?" "It's not a kid. It's something. Bro, it's Olga. Olga's with him." Holy shit. Jeko quickly went back inside, and a moment later he was out the door in the hallway, holding a cell phone in one hand and a brass knuckle in the other. "Call the cops. I'm going up there to check on things. Just trust me, okay?" "Okay, but I shouldn't have let him go up there alone. He had no idea who or what he was dealing with." I stupidly listened to him, and now I regret it deeply. As soon as I called for backup, I went up to check things out myself. But as soon as I got close to the front door and stepped into the hallway, I heard a gut-wrenching scream from the kitchen. Slowly, painfully, the creature was tearing Jake apart with its bare hands, ripping pieces of him off and flinging the bloody mess around the room. I just stood there, frozen, unable to do anything but watch the nightmare unfold. Then the creature suddenly grabbed his head and, without much effort, ripped it clean off. Only after hearing that horrifying voice, as if from the very depths of hell, I finally snapped out of it and rushed to the bedroom where Olga was lying. I desperately wanted to believe she was okay, that I could still save her. But when I entered the room and pulled the blanket off, instead of my beloved, there was only a bloody mess. Her head was lying next to her body on my pillow. The terror and despair were frozen on her face. I can't even begin to imagine what she went through in the last moments of her life. From there, everything became a blur. I locked the doors, and while the monster was tearing her apart, I quickly grabbed some clothes from the closet and put them on. I couldn't find any shoes, so I had to jump out the window barefoot. Thank God it had snowed a lot the day before, or I would have broken every bone in my body. So this is the story. And you want me to believe all of this? The investigator picked up his cup and took a small sip. Kirill Alexandrovich, when we arrived at your house, we asked to take you to the station and provide protection. I honestly hope to hear a more believable version of events. Maybe your friend attacked your wife? Wait, you don't believe me? There were bodies, torn to pieces like a bear had mauled them for hours. A human can't do that. First of all, stop shouting, this isn't a market. And second, I disagree with you. A human is capable of a lot of things. After my long years in service, I can tell you that. As for your story, I've been to the crime scene. That's part of my job. And guess what? No children's clothes, no birth certificates, no boy in the pictures, nothing. There's no video footage of him entering your apartment either. Based on your version, I'm afraid you're the only suspect, Kirill, and I'll have to arrest you. After those words, there was some commotion in the investigator's office. Several police officers entered the room and forcefully put handcuffs on the man, who was later convicted of double murder, the deaths of his wife and best friend. He never managed to prove his innocence.